So, good evening. Simon Jacobson here. I welcome you all, everyone, wherever you may be. And we shall talk about the soul's journey, one of the greatest and mysterious questions that people ask, which is, where does the soul go to after death? And the reason I chose this topic this week is because, in a puzzling way, this week's Torah chapter, every week has its corresponding Torah reading. So there are 52 weeks in the year. Every week has its own chapter. And each chapter consists of 7 sections. So 7 days of the week, 52 chapters. In effect, every day of the year has its corresponding section. So this week's Torah reading, which is the 5th chapter, the 5th chapter of the book of Genesis. So the name and title of the chapter, based on the first words of the chapter, is The Life of Sarah. And the puzzling thing about it is that it would seem like the chapter is going to tell you about the life of Sarah. You read a chapter heading or a title of a book and it's called The Life of Someone, you assume it's going to be their life. Instead, the chapter begins that this is the life of Sarah. She lived for 127 years and passed away. And the entire chapter talks about her death and the events that happened subsequent to her death, including Abraham buying a burial plot for her, which becomes Hebron, which till this day remains the Maros HaMachpelah in Hebron, that controversial spot where you have the patriarchs, Abraham and Sarah, and Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob and Leah, and they say also Adam and Eve are all buried there. Any of you have ever been there? Okay. So, and then it continues with the continuing story of all the events that take place as following her death, including Abraham sending his servant to go find the shidduch. This was the first version of J-Date, finding a match for his son Isaac. So why would the Torah call this chapter by the name Life of Sarah? Her life is actually related more in detail in last week's chapter, or 2 weeks ago, but last week primarily. So that itself begs a question, and therefore, obviously, it compels us to really think about what is life and what is death. And when we say someone is alive, what does it really mean to be alive? And then, of course, as I began, what is it that happens to us after death, if anything? Obviously, there are those that feel or believe that nothing happens. You simply your body decomposes in the earth, and it's all over, and that's that. But the real question is, how much do we really know about what's going on the other side of the curtain, so to speak? It's just because we have our own perspectives and myopic vision on this dimension, does that mean that nothing's happening elsewhere? That would be like the equivalent of a child or an ignorant person saying, since I don't see subatomic particles, and I don't see DNA, and I don't see other microscopic or submicroscopic elements, therefore they don't exist. Obviously it means you don't see it because our naked eyes are incapable, are containers that are not large enough to see it. If you use other instruments, you could see it. You could experience it. Maybe some things are not even seeable. Like, can one actually ever see love? Can one ever see pain? Yes, you can see its manifestation and its symptoms, but the root of it, just like we cannot see our psyches, we cannot see our souls. So there are things that are not defined by necessarily the tool called vision. That's all. This is what I'd like to address this evening. And beginning with that big question, where do we go? What happens to us after death? Where does the soul go to after death? Some of you are pretty familiar with the analogy I've given many times. First time I was ever asked this question, it struck me as odd the question, because when you study the science of the soul, that question really doesn't even have a place. And I'll explain to you why. So somewhat with a tongue-in-cheek type of imaginary, little humorous type of dialogue, think of it this way. Imagine a conversation taking place between electricity and an appliance. Take any appliance that we're familiar with. It can be a refrigerator, it can be an air conditioner, it can be a light bulb, it can be an iPad. So here's the imaginary conversation. I'll use refrigerator. I like that one for some reason. Okay? So here's the conversation. Electricity asks the refrigerator, the other way around. The refrigerator asks the electricity, where do you go when they pull the plug? Again, bear with me, this is an imaginary conversation. It's not meant to be literal. For those of you that have not met me before, I just don't want you to think that I'm a little off the wall. I may be off the wall, but not for this reason. Okay, so the refrigerator asks the electricity, where do you go to when they pull the plug? They pull the plug up, and when I no longer have you running through me, the refrigerator asks. And the electricity obviously answers with incredulousness and like, what kind of chutzpah is this question? The whole question is based on a false premise. What do you mean where I go? I've always been around. The question is, where'd you come from? You're a little box that just came around last 100 or 200 years ago. Someone figured out how to refrigerate food. They created the technology that is able to efficiently do that. And the electricity, feed you, basically energy. So I just go back to where I always was, not contained by a little box like you. The nerve that you have to ask me where I go just demonstrates how narrow you are, because all you know is about your little box. So you can't see outside of your box. You can't see outside of your refrigerator. So you wonder where I go to. I go to that place which maybe doesn't occupy time and space, which of course the refrigerator cannot relate to, because its entire existence is based on a very narrow perspective for all its benefits. Now it's a simple analogy. When you think about it, it's quite logical. What do we know about energy, about electricity? So however you want to define a soul, and I'm not necessarily even suggesting a religious definition of the soul, call it energy. It's something. It's whatever you want to use the words. Even if one is not a non-believer, the difference between the moment before death and the moment after. The moment after, there's a corpse with all the organs. I don't want to sound morbid, but I'm just trying to make my point. A corpse with all the organs in place, the eyes and the ears and the heart and the mind. And let's, for argument's sake, say everything is functioning. And then a moment later, I'm saying a moment before all that was working, you could speak to this person, communicate, they were present, and then suddenly they're not. I tragically had the unfortunate experience to see that with my own father. So a moment this way and a moment that way, and I was there. No one should ever have to see these things. It's painful enough, but the point is, what happens? So it's, at minimum, it's some form of electricity that left. Obviously, at maximum, the soul is a lot more than just electricity. The person you love, the personality, it would be quite demeaning to call it just electricity. There's a human being, and you continue to love that person even if they are physically not present. But as far as the analogy goes, I think it's an excellent way of looking at it. So the question itself, where do a soul go to, is based on a premise which itself is flawed. The premise is you think you are where it's at, just like the refrigerator thinks it's where it's at. And then you ask, where does the soul go to? Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the soul is where it's at, and it's the little time that it spends, 80, 90, 100 to whatever years on this earth, is like the refrigerator, occupies a certain section of time and space, and that's what we barely can understand. Take it a step further. How much do we even know about life on earth, let alone beyond? What do we know about life? What do we know about, take the mind? With all the medical breakthroughs, and with all scientific knowledge today, the mind, that small little entity that's the size of your palm, like this, carries mysteries that any scientist, well, I can tell you, have yet to be discovered. We know very little about the mind. And that's just one aspect. Even the areas that we've mastered, and by no means am I in any way trying to belittle medicine and science. Obviously, they have saved lives, lifespan. I mean, things have changed dramatically. But still, the more we know doesn't mean we know it all. It means there are mysteries that continue. This is just the frame of a body, 5-6 foot tall, human being like you and I, 100 pounds, 150 pounds. We don't have to go higher than that. 200 pounds. It doesn't really matter. I mean, in the scheme of things, what's 200 pounds, But the bottom line is, it's a very quantifiable and very easily identifiable measurement. It's small, relatively, and yet, in this small little entity, how many mysteries do we contain? And I'm not even getting now into our unconscious, and into our fears, into our insecurities, the things that affect you every second of your day. How many forces are at work that we're not even aware of, that are shaping our decisions, that are creating indecisiveness, that paralyze us, that don't allow us to have healthy relationships. All going on in this little body of yours or mine. So the point of making is that any honest appraisal of this is clearly that we know very little. We know probably less than a refrigerator does about electricity than about what is the true life force that really gives us energy. So then you could say, okay, with that point being stated, the class should be over. That's it. I made my statement that we know very little, and what else can be said? However, there's a lot that can be said. Once you get over this first step of at least knowing what you don't know, or acknowledging that you don't know, interestingly, you can begin to start knowing it. You see, our biggest trap is arrogance, always. Thinking that you have it figured out. When you think you have it figured out, obviously, and you don't, you are your own worst enemy. Because at least knowing that there's a bigger picture leaves a certain receptivity and openness. I don't know, so I'll read, I'll study, I'll listen, I'll consult. But when you think you know, or you think, let's say in the case of the refrigerator, and let's say it didn't have this dialogue with electricity, it would be convinced that it hasn't worked out, and that's it. But when you ask that question, suddenly the refrigerator, or in our case, our box, suddenly says, okay, 1 second. So if that's the case, that the soul is where it's at, and we're not where it's at, then what is going on in that world? And here, the good news is that there are hundreds, if not thousands of pages discussed about the soul's journey. And it's not based purely on faith, believing that something is there. It's when you allow yourself to not be convinced that you have it all, that you're where it's at, that you begin to actually can have an experience that is beyond. And you can actually go to that place. So, where the poets and the singers and the artists and the authors throughout history have all aspired to find out what's going on the other side. Breaking through to the other side is one of the key expressions coined by one of the rock bands of the 60s. But it goes back to, named after Blake's statement about cleansing the doors of perception. Everything is infinite. And even those that did not experience psychedelics and always aspired to that other side. Some call it, in Hebrew we use the expression in the Yom Kippur prayer, Ma'achere HaPargut. What's going on the other side of the curtain, behind the curtain. Expressions of going to paradise. Expressions of knocking on heaven's door. The going down the rabbit hole. I can give you a whole list of words, litany of expressions of the aspiration of someone trying to find out what happens on the other side. And in essence, that's really the big question, because relating to that can allow us to appreciate our own existence in a different way. And that's what I submit is the key reason that the chapter in this week's Torah is named, particularly in a very provocative way, because it forces you to start thinking, if this chapter was named the death of Sarah, okay, that would be obvious. It talks about her death. The fact that her death and the events following her death are called the life of Sarah force us to start thinking, what is life and what is death? Maybe life really begins after what we call death. If, as I said, electricity is confined in a refrigerator, where does electricity really experience itself in an unbridled and in full glory? Not when it's contained or trapped in a box, but when it is when it's unfettered, when it's not trapped. So you could argue that the deepest soul's experience real life is not when a soul is trapped in a body, but when a soul is without a body. Now, I understand you may say, well, how does that help us, in this earth and when we are in bodies? But if that's true, then that is exactly what the mystics and all the great seekers always looked for. They wanted to have that experience in the body, to have an out-of-body experience in the body, if you want to put it that way. And there's an expression, "Elamcha tir b'chayecha," that you should see your world, meaning the world to come, or the great, deeper worlds in your lifetime. It's a blessing. It's considered a gift to be able to experience in our lifetime, while we're confined in this box called material life, to experience that which is beyond. But the first prerequisite for it all, which I shall definitely elaborate upon later, is what we call bittul. The ability to suspend your own perspective, because without that perspective traps and doesn't allow us to experience that which is beyond us. And this is true across the board. There is no growth and there is no journey anywhere if you remain trapped in your perspective. Simple as that. No matter how brilliant you are, it's still going to be a confined and defined and subjective perspective. Like the classic story, the joke from the city of Chelm. I've shared this many times, but it captures it well. Where Chelm was this little town of in Poland. There's a whole folklore of parables and stories and jokes on the expense of these Chelm townspeople, of their foolishness. They say actually Chelm were really wise people actually that lived there, but their neighbors were resentful, so they created all these like stupid jokes. But they all have very profound psychological insights. So here's the story with the Chelm farmer. So Chelm was a small town, so you could imagine the farm on Chelm was also quite small. But one day but this farm, even though it was a small farm, it was his baby, this farmer, because he had inherited this farm from his parents and grandparents, generations back. So every grain of soil was like his baby. He cared for it, nurtured it, as it was his personal. So one day he receives a guest, and the guest is a big town farmer from another part of the world called the United States. And in the United States, the farms are a little bigger than what's going on in Europe, especially in this Chelm town. So the day comes, this guest happens to be his cousin. He shows him around. The Chelm farmer shows his guest around. Chelm farm, so proud. They sit down to dinner, and the Chelm farmer, wanting to get a good compliment, says to his cousin, "So what do you think about my farm here in Chelm?" He says, "It's very nice and cute, but it's so tiny." And the Chelm farmer is taken aback and insulted. This is his baby, you remember? "What do you mean it's so tiny? How big is your farm in Texas?" Or wherever he comes from. She says, so he's looking for a point of reference. So he tells his cousin, he says, "My farm in Texas, it takes me all day to travel from one end of with my tractor, to travel from one end of the farm to the next." The Chelm farmer suddenly, feels compassion and empathy for his cousin. He says, "Don't feel bad. I once had a tractor like that too." Okay? So the Chelm farmer was not being malicious or trying to be cute or anything. He couldn't fathom a farm that large. He never saw anything like it. And even in his imagination, you can't imagine something that's not, it's in the realm of possibility. We don't imagine certain things. So for instance, if we were to pass out a questionnaire here, and you were asked the question, are you narrow-minded, closed-minded, or open-minded? Are you objective or subjective? How many people do you think are going to check off the box, I'm narrow-minded, closed-minded? I mean, unless they're trying to be funny, but most people are not going to mark. Because you have to remember, subjectivity makes you think you're objective, obviously. So this Chelm farmer could have been a very pure guy, innocent. But remember, our perspective is not about truth or not truth. It's about, our objectivity is only as good as our perspective is. For him, a farm, he had his parameters of what a farm. A large farm, okay, a little bigger than mine. How much bigger could it be? So in his mind, it must be with the vehicle. Problem is not this is such a large farm. So he felt bad, because he remembered he once had a shmata jalopy just like that. That took him all day to crank up. We all have those experiences. You spend the entire day to move something from here to there. So that's what he was convinced. That was the reason that it took him all day. So we all have our little farms, everyone. No matter how sophisticated or educated and literate you may be, we all have our farms. That doesn't mean, obviously, some people have vast amounts of knowledge, are very educated, and some less. But everybody is subjective, because everybody has subjective experiences, attitudes to things. Attitudes that have shaped you long before you had any choice. Attitudes that are imposed upon us by our parents, by our cultures, by our communities, for good or for bad. But to say that you're just a clean slate, everything, you're open, you're objective to anything, that's absolutely not true. No one is that way. Now that's not a criticism of the human race, because how do people get beyond that is acknowledging that. That's the only thing that's necessary. Acknowledge it. So to speak, recuse yourself from a situation if your subjectivity may be biasing you. Or in your own mind, you want to find the truth to something, the first step is you have to get out of the way. In Hebrew, as I mentioned before, there's a word that's called bittul. Bittul means, it's a Hasidic expression, it's also used in Talmudic terms, referring to laws of kosher, and one thing is how one thing gets nullified by other things, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a psychological state where you suspend yourself to allow in a new perspective. That is the first sign of intelligence. Intelligence is not how brilliant you are. It's the humility to be able to allow in new intelligence. Because as brilliant as you may be, it's still your brilliance, and it's going to be subjective. Somewhere you'll be subjective. Whereas that first step of acknowledging that there's something beyond you, that allows you to be receptive and know you can trust yourself. And others can trust you because they know that you're not trapped in your own ideas. And if another idea comes your way, and something that contradicts whatever it is that you knew, you're open to hearing, that's called growth. And don't think it's that simple. It's not that simple. It's easier said than done. In topics like abstract sciences like mathematics or physics and stuff like that, it's easier in a way. Unless you're invested in a conclusion because you spent a long time. And you see, even great scientists forge and are caught with unethical behavior because they're invested in something. They're invested in success. They may be frustrated, etc. But where it gets more complicated is not in academic areas. It gets more complicated in personal areas. You can be the most brilliant person, doesn't mean you don't have personal interests. So in areas of relationships, areas of dealing with parents, children, love, pain, being hurt, there nobody, no matter what, the most educated person is not immune from being biased for obvious reasons. Which is how the Torah captures it. The Torah captures it in one sentence by saying, Hasheched ya'aver einei chachamim, which means bias or bribery, blinds the eyes of the wise. Salaf tzivrei tzadikim, it distorts the tongue, the mouth of the righteous. And the Torah calls this person chachamim and tzadikim. And not as a euphemism, as an actual, this is a real wise person. Now, if a person can be so biased that it distorts that it blinds the eyes or distorts his speech, his thinking, you wouldn't call such a person wise or a tzaddik. But the Torah is making a very big point that there's nobody immune to it. Everyone, the wisest, the greatest tzaddik, can be biased and is biased. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. That's the way we've been created. We have a certain need to preserve your own life. If you were not biased, you would not protect your own life. You'd be so oblivious to yourself. So there's a need to have chayecha kaidmin, to take care of your life. And that requires certain subjective interest. That you feel your pain. No one else can feel your pain for you. However, what makes someone truly a truly great person is they don't get trapped by their biases because they know they're biased. So it's not like the guy, and this has happened to me more than once, so this isn't just theoretical, who says, yes, I have blind spots, but I know what they are. That's like the doctor that tells you, I'll tell you when you need a second opinion. The whole point is a second opinion not from this doctor. You want to hear someone else, not when he tells you need it. Because it's another subtle form of control, or maybe not so subtle. So that the ability to recognize that is the key to real wisdom. And you'll see throughout history, the people who truly reached the greatest heights were not just the most brilliant people. It was the people who were able to suspend their way everyone thinks about things and go completely to another place. Einstein said it, and Steve Jobs said it. They all said the same, I think. It was all about getting away from what you know. not from what you, not doing what you know. That's when you really can achieve completely different, you can enter into a different stratosphere, take a quantum leap, because it's not based on your experience, it's based on something beyond your experience. And that's when you can dream and imagine things that are far beyond your own perspective. Now that's not easy to do. It's not easy to. And everyone likes to think that think that they think out of the box. Think out of the box. You hear it all the time. And who is it that sells what do they sell? Called out of the bun. Which company is it? Domino's, one of these. Huh? Taco Bell. Okay, fine, good. So it's a great line if you think out of the box, but it's like, how many people truly think out of the box? Is it even easy to think out of the box? As I said, with so many forces that shaped our box, we don't even know what our box may be like. To first know you're in a box, and first know the parameters, maybe you're out of the box is really part of your box. How do you know? So it's a cute and it's a great line to use, and it sounds like so adventurous and bold and courageous, but it's not that simple. And even if you end up thinking sometimes out of the box, how many people act on it? One thing thinking about it, it's an exercise in fantasy. Another is to act on it. And there, the traps that I mentioned, the fears, insecurities, are all come in the way, because whether we like it or not, the known evil is always easier than the unknown one. So even if you know your life is not working out so well, it's much more riskier psychologically for many of us to try something new, because it may be worse in our minds, especially if you think of life in that type of fatalistic way. So there are many forces, therefore, that keep us trapped. And this discussion, as I said, this chapter talking about the death in the context of life, is meant to provoke us specifically. There's an expression in the Talmud that goes like this: Tzaddikim, righteous people, even in their deaths, gam b'misosam kriyim chayim, even in their death they're called alive. And Rishoyim, wicked people, gam b'chayim kriyim mesim, even in their lifetimes they're called dead. Now, that's obviously just continues this provocative theme. What does that mean? So obviously, if you ask a doctor or a scientist or an average person in the street, what is life and death? So you'll get a certain clinical definition. If a person is breathing, if their heart is pumping, their brain is working, it's called being alive. And yes, God forbid, there are people perhaps in comas or like vegetables, but they're technically alive. Because there's a medical definition of life. Torah also has a definition of biological life. Is it breath? Is it the heart beating? Torah, it's actually breath is a key element. There's a whole discussion about what happens if there's a discrepancy, for example, heart transplants. Torah perspective, it's not such a simple matter. Not that it can't be done, but there's issues involved, because you cannot take away an organ from someone that's considered alive from the Torah point of view. Now, what happens if doctors call him dead, but the Torah still says he's alive, based on different criteria? But I'm not going there. There's not a discussion on this topic. So the definition of life that most of us would say is, as I said earlier, certain criteria. The Talmud, this statement that I just made, has a different definition of life. You could have somebody who is completely functional, and every one of their faculties is working perfectly, humming along, and will tell you, how do you feel today? I feel like I'm dead. I feel like a zombie. What happens when people have heartbreak? Real disappointments. So your body can be functioning perfectly well. I'm sure psychological pain is going to ultimately have effect also on our health. But let's, for argument's sake, the health is intact at this point. People will say that. I feel like I'm dead. I feel my life. Because obviously life is more than just biological function. So actually in the Torah, in Judaism, there's really 5 definitions of life. Or maybe put it this way, 5 dimensions of the soul. You may have heard this: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chayei, yechida. 5 names. But they're not just 5 names, they're actually 5 dimensions. Nefesh, when you say something has a nefesh, you're saying that it is biologically alive. It's functioning. But that can be on the minimum level, a standard we don't want to experience. Because that means there's the bare minimum of functioning. The next level, sometimes life is called ruach. Nefesh, ruach, neshama. Ruach, which means it can be wind, it can be spirit, but it's another definition, another dimension of the soul. That's called emotional life. So you can be biologically alive, but emotionally feel dead. Now, are you clinically dead? No, you're not dead, obviously, from a biological point of view, but you're dead from an emotional point of view. You don't feel, or you may feel numb, paralyzed, you feel nothing, or feel worse, you feel opposite. What is the nothing? There must be some word for it. You feel horrible. That's where is the nothing. Then there's neshama, which is maybe more the common word used for soul, but they're all used. Nefesh is used, ruach, and neshama is the third. Neshama is intellectual life, which means not just that you're biologically functioning and surviving, not just emotional experience, you're also intellectually alive. An example of emotional without intellectual would be, you could be emotionally alive, a lot of emotions are alive, but your mind is not stimulated. Many times we can get trapped in all kinds of hedonistic emotions without any type of sublime element to it that the mind offers. Okay. Then there's two final dimensions. One is called Chayei, one is called Yechida. So Chayei literally means life. You could say Chayei is life, Chayei is Chayei. But in this context, this is already a transcendent dimension to life. So you could have biological, emotional, intellectual, but lacking transcendence. Lacking that the angst or the aspiration to something beyond. And that transcendence for many people is expressed, can be in many different ways. Music, for instance, art, travel, romance. And I don't mean just the emotional element of it. I mean the journey to another place type of thing. And of course, spirituality, religion for some, is a transcendent experience. And finally, the fifth dimension, Yechida, which is harder to define, is really the essence of a human experience. It's the essence of the soul, or as close as we can get to the essence. It's almost a place which you don't really experience, it emerges. So it's interesting, in Jewish tradition, there are 3 prayers daily. On Shabbat and holidays, Shabbos and holidays, there are 4 prayers. And on Yom Kippur, the only day of the year, there's 5. It's not an accident, it's not coincidence. It's because, generally speaking, we have access to the 3 dimensions of Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, and hence the 3 prayers, daily prayers. Shabbat and holidays, we are able to experience the transcendence, so you add additional musaf, an additional prayer. And Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, we're able to enter the Holy of Holies of your own spirit and psyche, soul, and therefore the 5th Ne'ilah prayer. I don't want to go into detail on this, I've discussed it other times. My point that I want to lead to is that when we define life, it's much more complicated than just saying, I'm alive. Yes, technically when a seed is fertilized, it starts and conceives, you conceive and a fetus begins to grow. Technically you can say life has begun. Well, maybe throughout pregnancy different stages emerge. Child emerges from the womb upon birth. Some call that the beginning of life. But then the child develops. And I think I discussed this back in the summer, that there's the Kabbalah talks about 3 stages of maturity. It's called Ibur Yanika Moichin, or sometimes used Mutva, Murgish, and Muskel. But beyond the Hebrew, what it really means is that there are 3 stages that are really determined of how the intellect matures and how it impacts the emotions. So a newborn child is driven primarily by emotion. It's hungry, it cries. There's no talking logic, there's no patience, there's no tolerating, there's no coexisting with others. And it's not because the child chooses to be selfish, so therefore it's not a bad thing. At that stage it's necessary for a child's survival. Just like 9 months in his mother's womb, so the Kabbalah says, why is a child in a fetal position? Because the head and the heart are all rolled into the legs essentially, because the main function there is functionality. It's growing. You cannot expect the mind and the heart to be fully developed, so therefore the emotions and the mind are not yet fully expressed. And essentially you can define maturity is going from being an emotionally driven creature that is driven by impulse and needs, my needs, me, to coming to understand with your mind and ultimately emotionally as well, that there's more to life than just me. Now, for a child to be a narcissist, that's the way it's meant to be. Where it's a crime is when an adult is a narcissist. Because an adult is not supposed to be a narcissist. Child, that's the way God created it. Child is dependent on its parents for survival, especially early stages. But if we don't grow up, so chronologically you can grow into an adult, but it doesn't mean you are an adult. It just means that you, in age and in size, are an adult. But when it comes to, when you really want to define an adult from a Torah point of view, adult is someone whose soul has learned to express itself. So maturity is intellectual and emotional maturity, where you come to realize it's not just your perspective on life that matters. There's a bigger picture. Unfortunately, this is something that we're not taught. You either learn it by experience, trial and error. Most of us learn it by real mistakes. Either you hit rock bottom and you realize you don't have it figured out, or something, crisis, some trauma, something that breaks or challenges your perspective that you realize, hey, maybe there's another way to look at it. What I'm here to tell you is that you don't have to wait for crisis and trauma and rock bottom to wake up. That if you apply yourself and if you're an intelligent person, you realize that our farm is always limited. So making a statement that the death of Sarah is really called her life, challenge us to define what about our lives. Are you alive or are you dead? Now I don't mean that in a obviously literal sense, but where are your emotions and intellect stand? And how alive are you? How much of your soul is being actualized? Or let's put it maybe more psychological terms. How much of your potential is being actualized? How much remains dormant and lying asleep within your soul and within your psyche, and how much is being expressed? And I go back to the reason that it's mostly not being expressed is usually due to our comfort zones, our fears, and whatever it is that keeps us shaped, that shapes us, and above all, as I said, the thing that keeps us thinking that we have it figured out, that we are pretty good, with a little tweaking we'll be better. Now, by no means am I suggesting that anyone here is not good, we're all great, but as they say in Yiddish, if good is besser is besser, which means if you're good is better, not better. So as great as you are, the key thing is to realize that as you climb the mountain, the horizons broaden, and you see bigger realities. When you study Torah properly, and I emphasize the word properly, and I'll tell you in a moment why. When you study it properly, that's really what the Torah does. It challenges your perspective on life and experience. Now, why did I say properly? Because many of you will say, well, I went to yeshiva, and I know yeshiva people who know a lot of Torah, and I don't see them actually having any broad perspective at all. Many of them are narrow-minded as it gets, and religion can be actually a very constricting and a closed-minded experience. And I wouldn't disagree with you. That's why I said properly. See, here's an interesting Mishnah that says in the Pirkei Avos, it says, Ethics of the Fathers, it says, Ein lecha ben chayrin el misha esik b'Torah. Translated loosely, it means you're not a free person unless you study Torah. Okay, 1 second. But that's a very, it can even be like a racist statement. But remember, think about it. The Mishnah does not say that if you study Torah, you're a free person. It says you can't be free unless you study Torah. So you could study Torah and not be free at all because you're not studying Torah the way it's supposed to be studied. If the Torah, and I only say if, just to play devil's advocate, the voice of the skeptic, if it is truly a divine mandate and a divine wisdom, so the first above all thing that the Torah should be doing is showing us a perspective that is beyond me. It's meant to open your mind to realize there's a bigger reality than yourself. Now, here's not the place or the time to go into an analysis how the Torah was hijacked and ended up becoming a force of narrow-mindedness and bigotry and condescension and judgmentalism and all that. But when you look at the great true Torah giants in history, the people who really were pioneered it, Abraham, Moses, and others like that, their perspective on life was extremely nonconformist, extremely open-minded, and for them the Torah was an emancipating experience. It was showing them a perspective from a bird's eye view of reality instead of looking at it from the ground level. And that's why it says that you cannot be free without it, because without some type of perspective that's beyond you, how could you ever be free? As I said, you're only as free as your subjective wisdom or intelligence allows you to be. Like that Chelm farmer, is he free? Yeah, he's free technically, but he's as free as his mind is as free as his farm is, meaning the size of his farm. So the idea of understanding life and death in this fashion takes on a whole different shape and form. Now, before I continue, I just want to make an important disclaimer. In Buddhism, a lot of the Far Eastern disciplines, especially in Tibetan philosophy, so everyone's heard the Tibetan book of death, of the dead. And there are different variations of it. So there's a lot of focus in the Far Eastern thinking of how that the greatest fear a human being has is death, is the end. To think that everything ends. And people will do everything. And some even theorize that most of the human ambition and drive is to some way minimize the impact of death, which is why we try to immortalize ourselves. The pharaohs tried to do it through the pyramids. Today there's, the cryogenic freezing. There's all kinds of ways. And other people do it through vanity and through ego, some way leaving a legacy. And in Buddhism, the approach, which I will contrast to Judaism, is that ultimately to teach a person that life on earth should not be valued that much, and understand that life is on the spirit level. And therefore they're not to think of death as the end, but to think of death almost as the beginning. The interesting contrast to Jewish thinking, and there are many similarities, that's why I bring it up, because some of you may be familiar with it. In Jewish thinking, the interesting thing is there's no question that the soul continues its journey even after its short span of time that it spends on earth. But in Judaism we do cherish life, because the purpose is that the electricity should be in a box, and the box should experience that which is outside of the box. So it's not about aspiring to just go to that place. It's about connecting that place to our place. You understand the distinction? I'll just give it to you in a context a little more, a little more Talmudic. There's a debate, there's an argument between two greats. One is the Rambam and one is the Ramban. The difference between them, one is Maimonides, one is called Nachmanides. Maimonides lived around 1,000 years ago. Nachmanides around 900 years ago. And the debate was, what is the ultimate reward for human beings' efforts on this earth? So you'll know the world, Olam Haba, the world to come, which is like in a sense a reward for this world. Maimonides makes it clear the world to come is not to come as in time, it comes afterwards. It's cause and effect. Essentially, heaven is what you create with your actions. So it's not some place between Mars and Venus or beyond the solar system. It's a spiritual type of reward for your behavior, cause and effect. Okay. So the debate, the argument that they have is the ultimate reward, will it be for souls alone or for souls within bodies? So in Jewish thought there's the concept that we say in the prayer every day of resurrection, which is another discussion. What does that mean? Well, just to make it a little palatable, it shouldn't sound so crazy. Just like I said earlier, that the question of where does the soul go to after death is similar to a refrigerator asking electricity where it goes to when they pull the plug. The same thing, let's pose another type of question, and that is, if the soul is energy and electricity, why is it that at some point there will be death? Why? Think of it like this. If you poured the liquid water into a cup, and just for argument's sake, there's no effects of evaporation, is there any reason that the water should ever leave that cup? Or electricity energizing an appliance. The only reason would be is if you stop the flow of electricity or the appliance breaks down. But if neither of those two things happens, why should there ever be a reason of a cessation of that fusion? Which is why the Bible says that when Adam and Eve were put into the Garden of Eden, God says to them, do not eat from the tree of knowledge. The day you eat from it, you will die. Which implies that if they did not eat from it, they would never have died. What does that mean? It means the following. That a soul is an infinite force of energy. It has no reason to ever leave a human body. The only reason would be the equivalent of the cup and the water, is if the body gets punctured. The cup gets punctured, so ultimately the water is going to leak out. If there was a seamless flow between material and the spiritual, death would not be possible. So the concept of death from a Torah point of view, the pain of death, is not just, and I'm not saying it's just as a minimalization, but it's not just that we are no longer in touch with those that we loved. It's because it reflects on a fundamental flaw that matter and spirit are not seamless, are not aligned. And that's why a soul can see us and we can't see it. The pain is therefore the disconnect, the finality of the disconnection. So in your memories and your heart, you can continue to love someone that's passed on. And you can love them just as you loved them when they were here. But what's missing is you cannot touch them. You can't look at them. You can't speak to them as we speak to each other on this earth. And even people of spirit who don't see the material world as such a serious entity, still, from a Jewish perspective, there's something about the material world that's critical. And this is where the Rambam, going back to their disagreement. So the Rambam holds, consistent to his approach to many things, that ultimate reward is a spirit without a body. Because a body at the end of the day limits, as I said, the refrigerator confines the flow of electricity. The body has to in some way compromise the true spiritual experience. That's Maimonides' theory. Nachmanides disagrees and says that since God is neither divine, well, he doesn't say this is how it's explained, that since God is neither spirit nor matter, and beyond both, why would it be a problem that spirit and matter should join together, and the ultimate reward would be neshama's bigufim, a soul outside of a body. And that's his opinion, and Kabbalistic and Hasidic thought rule on this, and they rule like Nachmanides, not like Maimonides. This is a way subtle distinction of what I compared with Far Eastern and Jewish thinking. So what does that lead us to in this discussion here? Like this, that the soul is an entity that we have very little knowledge of. As I said, even the human brain, which is a physical force and can be physically observed, is a mystery. I once asked a neurologist, neurosurgeon, and asked him, "What you've studied brains? Tell me what you look at this brain that's like the palm of your hand. It's made up of physical components. How can you? How many ideas can rest in the brain?" And he began to laugh, and he said to me, "We have no idea. We just know how it works. We know that it works. We know that this brain, for some reason, charges neurons, and when these neurons start reacting to each other, they create miracles. How? We don't know exactly." He says, "I don't know if we'll ever know." So clearly, you have here a physical entity that is definitely generating some type of something that isn't physical, at least not in the technical sense of it. Ideas. How many ideas can your brain hold? You want to know what your hard drive can hold? Open up your computer and it'll tell you, these are the limits. 500 gig, 1,000 gig, what's after gigs? What do they call them? Whatever. The terabytes, right. And maybe it'll grow, it'll be terabytes, I don't know what's after terabytes. I didn't get there yet, right? But it's something up there, okay. So there's a limit. And when you reach the limit, the hard drive is going to tell you that you have no more room. How many ideas can go into your brain? And the brain, and we all know it's not about size, obviously. And how many ideas? No clue. How many ideas do you even carry in your brain? You don't even know how many things are in your memory, in your invisible memory. The point I'm making here is that when you're talking about a soul itself, we know nothing about it because we can't even observe it. We can only observe it through our life experiences. So Judaism's thinking is like this, that you rather really understand the experience of the soul. So let's take the life of Sarah. You want to know when someone is really alive? You have to see what they're like after they're physically not here. Because as long as they're physically here, you could say their physical presence is dominant. You could say that their influence, people fear them, etc., etc. That we could sit here 3,700 years later and talk about Sarah as our mother. We know where she's buried, where she walked. Think about that. Is that called death? So physically she's not here, but she may be more alive than many people walking on this earth. She doesn't have the biological dimension, but she has the ruach, neshama, chayei, yechida. And that's why the Talmud says that even in their lifetimes, wicked people are called dead, and righteous people are called alive even in their deaths. It's a redefinition of life and death, basically. Now, this is not theoretical at all. It comes down to very practical. It's about how we can resurrect ourselves, if you want to put it that way. How we can reinvigorate, rejuvenate our own lives. And that is understanding what life is really about. The fact is, whether we like it or not, most of us, most of the time, are consumed with survival. When I say that, I don't mean necessarily only because you may not be able to make ends meet. Some people have a lot of money and they're still consumed with survival. Because anything that is materialistic sustenance, whether it's money or food, or anything else that the so-called here and now needs to survive, is survival. And that's biological at the end of the day. It could have some emotional elements to it, but it's ultimately, fundamentally, a biological experience. So we really need to then revisit and reframe our own priorities. The fact is, tomorrow morning, most of you probably have jobs, I hope. In this economy, who knows? Right? It's like that guy says, what do you do for a living? He says, I work for my brother. And what does your brother do? He's looking for a job. So there's a lot of people in that position. Okay? So at least you're not looking for the job. My brother's looking for the job. As soon as he has one, I'll have a job too. But whether it's a job or it's looking for a job or it's other minutiae of life, that's what consumes us. And that's what we do, our breathing hours, our waking hours, our breathing time, that's what we spend most of it trying to figure out how to function, how to survive. It mostly deals with, at best, nefesh level. The other levels. But then, of course, there's something that beckons in us that you want a relationship. So even in this great New York with all its distractions, people want relationships. And a relationship is a very ruach level. It's an emotional level. Biological is not enough. So what happens, unfortunately for many of us, we lower our expectations, and if we can get something that at least satisfies us for a short term, better than nothing. But you're basically under what's it called? Short. When somebody doesn't live up to their potential, there's a word for it. Whatever. Yeah, but like short drift or something like that, right? Short change yourself. That's what I wanted to say. But underachieve, that's the idea. Yeah. So bottom line is, what happens is that you have a whole part of your soul that's not fully functioning. It's not fully expressing itself. And it just sits bottled up within you. Which is why this discussion of life after death is so vital. Not because only for the exotic reasons to know what happens to us afterwards. There's much in Judaism that talks about that. But like one Rebbe once said, someone came to him and said, what happens, what reincarnations do I come from, and where reincarnations will I reincarnate to? And then the follow-up question is like, how do I interpret my dreams? So the Rebbe said to him, I have enough problems figuring out what to do when I'm awake before I get to my dreams. I have enough problem figuring out what to do with my life here before I figure out the reincarnations. But we're majorly intrigued by the exotic, by the unknown. If you thought a legitimate person, or even not such a legitimate person, was going to tell you reincarnations, many people would sign up. The only thing is we usually are suspicious con artists. It also depends how much they're charging for it. But if it was free, why not? Because there's something about us that likes the exotica. We like the unknown. There are many theories for it. It's an art. One theory goes like this: the reason we like it is because it's escapism. Instead of having to deal with your life right now, be responsible for your life. Hey, if I can blame it that I was once a cricket or something else, maybe that's what defines why my life is so screwed up or something like that. It's like a cop-out type of thing. I'm not going to dismiss it completely because I'm sure there has some value to it. But the fact of the matter is, Judaism does focus on the here and now. But not because we don't believe or don't understand that there is life beyond this reality. But the point is, it's all about making you more responsible. That's what it comes down to. It's not just knowing what's going to happen to that soul. So obviously any of us that have experienced a loss of a parent, of a relative, of a loved one, would love to know where they are and whether they're at peace. So there's plenty that's said about that. But the end of the day is, after your concern is allayed, how does it help you? And if you come to discover, and this is what I'm saying now, it says it in many books, the souls that leave this earth are completely fine. We've got the problems, not them. The problems come in this reality, because this is the one that is a small farm with all kinds of myopic biases. They call that world, other side, the Olam HaEmes, the world of truth. This is the world of lies. So we've got more problems than they have. That's rest assured. And actually, it says something even more. That when we are in pain here, the souls that loved us and we love them are in pain because of us, not because of them. So, because as I said before, electricity outside of the refrigerator is unencumbered, is not fettered, it has many, many opportunities. But there's something that is achieved in this world that they cannot achieve, and that is that we can, even in a narrow place like this, we can experience that which is beyond. That is the ultimate purpose. So the Rambam, ultimately, in a sense, you could say, is like saying, you want to experience ultimate reality, you cannot do so as long as you are defined in a human body. An example would be the philosophy of asceticism. And there are schools of thought, again, Far Eastern especially, that believe that if you want to experience the spirit, you have to deprive yourself of the material. As long as your life is driven by money and by Wall Street and by physical success and physical pleasure, you cannot really experience the divine. You cannot experience the sublime. To do so, it's called the ascetic life, the monastic lifestyle, the life of a monk. And there are many people who find that very appealing, who've gone there and don't want to come back. What does Judaism say about that? Judaism does not at all condone that. Actually considers that to be a cop-out. Not because necessarily it's a sin per se. Somebody wants to cut themselves off from civilization, go up on the mountain and live their lives, this ethical, spiritual type of life. But Judaism in a certain way does see it as a sin. The great sin of the scouts, who did not want to go into Israel, the promised land, the story in the Torah, was precisely that. The reason they didn't want to go in, because they were very spiritual people, and they said, Eretz Eicheles Yishver. The material world is a land that consumes its inhabitants. Basically, they were telling you the rule of existence. Who has not been compromised? Who has not some way thrown in the towel dealing with the marketplace? So when they saw a land that consumes its inhabitants, they said they want to stay in this spiritual kollel called the wilderness, surrounded by the clouds of glory, Anania covered, protected by food from heaven, water from the stone, from the Be'er Miriam. Why do you need to go in and start dealing with the realities of struggling in life, the struggle of making a living, and all the other stuff that it brings, the potential corruption and greed, etc. So, logically, it seems to make sense. But that's not the mission. Al karcha chatachai, it says, you have to come down to this earth. Because the mission is not to escape to an easier place, to an oasis. Enter the battle, the fray, and bring there the divine. That's the ultimate goal. So yes, the Torah says take off on a Shabbat and holidays, create a little oasis once a week, different times in the morning, other times where you find a little spiritual strength. But then you got to go into the ring, and you have to battle the battles of life, and not become compromised, and bring that higher reality. That is the ultimate purpose. So our discussions, therefore, of the soul's journey beyond is really meant as I said, Elam Chatir B'Chayecha, to bring it to our lives here. To be able to experience that beyond right over here. And the way to do that, I go back to what I said earlier, is through the bittul, the suspension of your own perspective. I said suspension does not mean rejection. It doesn't mean annihilating your perspective. It means not worshiping it. It means realizing there's more to it more to life than what you think it is. And as soon as you're open to that, new truths emerge. And it happens to be the secret of relationships. Relationships fail, and I'm not trying to be overly simplistic because I'm sure there's complex reasons and many different reasons, and case by case there's no two stories that are alike. But if I was able to generalize or get to the root, relationships fail because people are not able to see beyond themselves. That's what it comes down to. So they can't solve a problem. Everyone's going to have problems in life, especially two people. You can't even solve your own problems, let alone when two people have problems. So why do some people can't solve problems and why can't others can't? It's not because some people have insurmountable problems. It's because they don't have the tools to solve them. They're either trapped in their own perspective, and then if two people get trapped in their own perspective, it just exponentially complicates the whole thing. Even if one is, and another person is ready to compromise or ready to look at another way of looking at things, if the other person is not, the relationship cannot survive. Again, I'm not trying to be simplistic, but that's essential. The complicated part is defining where those blind spots are and helping people get beyond them to try to find tools to solve problems. But it comes down to, that's what it comes down to. Again, I'm not trying to be naive. What the root of all battles in this world? Why are people at war with each other? Everybody wants to have a healthy life. They want to give their children a good life. So why are people at war? So if it's a religious war, it's because some of the people think that they have it figured out. This is God's plan. And everyone else is an infidel and have to be annihilated. Those fundamentalists that feel that way. Basically, it's an intolerance of another approach based on you thinking you got it figured out. Now, let's say you even do have it figured out. But, God created a very diverse world. Which is why Abraham, in last week's chapter, prays for the infidels. He knew Sodom was a wicked city. He wasn't arguing that. But he still felt, you created them all. Everybody's got hope. We have to try a different way. In other words, people who are truly soulful people are able to always go beyond their own perspective. They're the most tolerant and most coexistent, and interestingly, without compromising one shred of their integrity. We're not talking about someone who's just wishy-washy, everything goes, and therefore. No, very strong in their positions. But they're not driven by ego. They're driven by truth. And the fact that another person may not be there, that's that person's reality for now. So, you want to inspire? By all means. But through love, and not through preaching, and not through condescension, and definitely not through coercion. It's really faith in every human being's capacity. It's the respect of the sacred dignity of every human being. These are people who see a soul that is not trapped in a box. That's a true soulful person. Not just a person who knows how to talk about spirituality and knows everything going on in the spiritual realms. It's a person who doesn't take their own little box so seriously. That's what it comes down to. So humility is, yes, a critical component. Because there is a thing called spiritual arrogance. Just like some people are arrogant about one thing or another, if you're a more spiritual person than others, you can be arrogant about that and almost look at others, look down at them, how unevolved they are compared to your level of involvement. So Judaism does not preach necessarily spirituality, it preaches godliness, holiness. In the Torah you'll find the word Kedusha everywhere, holiness. You don't find the word spirituality. Because Kedusha, holiness, is a step beyond spirituality. Spirituality can be ego-driven. And holiness cannot. For something to be holy, sacred, means that it's a spirituality that's not about yourself. And that is ultimately the story when you read about and start wondering what is death, what is life. So what is going on the other side of the curtain? There's plenty going on. And the more you are able to free yourself from your perspective on this side of the curtain, the more you can experience that. Simple as that. It's very similar to how one experiences any real truth. You cannot acquire truth. It can only emerge. You cannot acquire it. It's a resonating experience that resonates when you cut away the extracurricular noise, the distractions, the turbulence, and then it emerges. I've said this many times in this class. So there are two types of experiences in life. There are things we acquire, things we emerge. We live in a world that is very, very adept at acquisition. We're acquiring all the time things. We shop, we go shopping, we buy things. Today, everything is available. Online, in stores, whatever you want. And it's created a mentality that you want something, you got to acquire it. And if you can't acquire it, it means you need more money. Or you need more options. The truth is, however, what it does is it desensitizes us to a whole other reality which can only be emerged. It never can be acquired. Can you acquire love? No way. Love is inside your heart. You're born with it. It's just a question is whether you're able to free up other parts of yourself to allow that love to emerge. And the same thing, love in other people and love to each other. Truth, again, is embedded within existence. The reason music, for example, resonates is the way the Kabbalists put it, is because there's music everywhere. Even if you don't hear it. Everything has music in it. So it resonates. It's not like, you may hear the sound coming from an iPod, or from the internet, or from a radio, or from other transmitter, but I'm talking about the music that you hear within. What does it do to you? It's because you have something inside you. That's called resonating. Resonating comes from the root, like, when you, what are those, they call them pitchforks, right? The sound forks. So what happens is when there's a sound in a room, there's a certain sensitivity that will pick up the vibrations. If you did not have music inside of you that can pick up the music, it would mean nothing. It would just be deaf ears. So there's something inside of you that responds to it and can lift the spirit, can transport you to another time and place without any training. You don't need to be trained to listen to music. You need to be trained to play music. But newborns and even children in their mother's wombs, it's been documented, respond to music. Respond to music. You see changes in the child's movement when the music is played. Because there's something in the spirit that relates to it. The Kabbalists, the mystics say, is because the soul is essentially a musical entity. The music is the language of the soul. But again, that's not the scope of this discussion here. The point I'm making here is that we don't believe in seances, but we definitely believe that you can connect to a soul that is not here any longer. Because, as I said, that journey continues on. So where do souls go to after death? Besides what I said earlier, that's like the refrigerator asking the electricity, where do you go? But let's rephrase it a moment. It's our limited perspective on space and time that allows us to ask that question. Where do things go? Just think about the question for a moment and you'll see what I mean. I mean, where it goes. Maybe some things don't go anywhere. Maybe they just remain and they're here, but on a different plane. Does anyone know how many subatomic particles are floating right here in this room right now? No scientist would ever estimate. It could be trillions beyond trillions. Because they don't occupy space. So it's not like you could say, well, within a certain space, there's only that many subatomic particles. The subatomic particles today, it's known, if you're familiar with quantum mechanics, that they're in states of probability. They don't even have, they're not measurable. Meaning, not because they're so tiny, and if you put a lot of them together, they suddenly become, no, it's like, just as an example, just like you put all the numbers in the world will never lead to infinity. So where's the infinite number? It doesn't occupy space as we know it. But we think in very limited terms. So we think, where do things go? For a young newborn child, for example, or not newborn, even a young child, leaving their home is like falling off the planet. That's why children don't leave abusive homes, because they don't understand of a world outside of their door. So whatever happens here is like, this is existence, and that's it. So the concept of going, when you see someone go away, it takes time to realize that person is still around. They just left. They're not in this room. That's all. Why is that not possible? If you think about it from the world of spirit, that when a soul leaves his body, what it simply does is it goes back like electricity that is no longer confined inside a box. So where are those souls? Right over here. They're just in a different dimension, a different plane. And how many dimensions are there? Unlimited amount of dimensions. When someone speaks words from the heart, it says, words from the heart enter your heart. And you know this from your own experience. You hear something, again, a song or words that touch you. A moment before it didn't touch you, now it touched you. What happened? Another dimension of yourself suddenly emerged. Was it there before? Of course it was there before. It's not like a new thing. You didn't purchase anything. It's not like a new acquisition, as I said. It's there all the time. So how many things are there right now inside of you that you don't have no clue? So from your point of view, you may think, I don't even have it. It's not here. It is here. So when the spiritual worlds are described in Kabbalistic thought of how the soul travels through them, it's essentially like thinking in terms of layers, one within the next. It's not time and space as we know it, like here is Earth, and if you go away from Earth there's the moon, and then there's Mars, and there's Venus, and Mercury, and then the planets the other direction. You know, from a point of view, spiritual space is really dimensions. And there are infinite amount of such dimensions, and they're within us right now and right here. Now, as I said, the pain of it is, of death, is because you can't relate and see that person in a physical sense of the word. But many people testify, and I could be one of them, that in many ways, a spirit of someone you loved works through you, even after they're not here. That still doesn't take away from the pain. You'd rather them be here, in the physical plane. But it means that there's something there. Now, this is not spooky like you hear voices, or they have to come to you in a dream, or, as I said, a seance where the spirits suddenly hover. That's trying to bottle electricity on the terms of our childish, immature terms. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you have to sublimate yourself and suspend the way you think about things, and then you'll experience those souls. Not try to bring them to your plane, you go to their plane. That's really what it comes down to. And that's not as so spooky and as weird sounding, if you think about it, because it really means it really means freeing yourself from the limits of how you see things. Did you ever have the experience of someone walking into a room, and as soon as you look at their face, you know what they're thinking, or what mood they're in? No? Some people are very good at that. They pick it up in a moment. You know, sadly, the people that are most sensitive are the people whose antennae are very in tune, are those that grew up in homes where they had to have very sensitive antenna because they grew up around people who were constantly posing danger to them. That's how it is. Children who become extremely hyper alert into adults is when they live in a home that's not safe. But nevertheless, there are people who just pick up things. You pick up a face, you pick up, what are you really seeing that someone else does not see? You know, and you can't even train someone. It's either you get it or you don't get it. What's happening is that you're not looking with regular eyes. You're looking at the spirit of the person. You may not call it the spirit, you call it the mood, the personality, and so on. But think, if simple mortals like us, without training, can have such instincts, imagine someone that is a truly soulful person. How much can they see? You know? Now, it's a scary thought because you don't want to meet someone like that who can see everything. No, we don't like to be exposed like that. But there are people who can see, not because they have miraculous powers, because they are not driven by ego. They don't think in terms of, they don't let their own limited perspective blind them, so they see a lot more. Every one of us can see more than we think we can see. But this interesting thing is not about buying a book and figuring out, here are 10 steps of how to figure out somebody. It's the opposite, actually. Here are 10 steps to stop thinking with your own tools. And automatically you become sensitive to others. The most sensitive people on earth are not the people who have deep perception of others. It's the people who have less focus on themselves. So they automatically are sensitive to another. You know? The idea of being a good listener is one of my favorite ones. I ask people how good of a listener they are. Some people think they're great listeners. And they're clueless. They're not listeners at all. But they think they're great listeners. So first of all, let's establish the difference between listening and hearing. To be a good hearer is not a good listener necessarily. Remember, tape recorders also hear things. That doesn't mean they're listening. That means they're hearing it. And they're even recording it, verbatim. You know that joke about the professor who's too busy to deliver his lectures? So he decides, since he has no time, when he's traveling, he records his lectures on a tape or a CD, whatever it is today. And he had an assistant come and put a tape recorder on the desk And all the students were required to listen to this tape recorder and take notes, just as if he was standing there. And then they would be they would be responsible for this information. A few months pass. He has to visit the university, so he decided he's going to drop into this class and see how great his innovation is. Maybe he can patent it and sell it as a time saver for professors, for teachers. So lo and behold, he peeks in the door, and to his chagrin or to his surprise, instead of seeing human beings and students at the desks, there's a whole bunch of tape recorders in their record mode. So the students basically learn by example. So he did that. He was successful in teaching them by example. They also became too busy to come, so they decided they put their tape recorders in record mode. And at the end of the day, everybody comes and picks up their tapes, and that's it. And they got them. So my machine spoke to your machine, and great, we made a connection. Technology, as we all know, texting today is the new thing. So I was driving a car with someone, and trying to get his attention, and by no means he was just completely ignoring me. So I text him, and he's sitting right near me. I told him physically sitting next to me, and he says, "Why are you texting me? You're sitting right near me." I said, "That's the first time I got a reaction, you know." So try that out. That in case you can't get someone's attention like that. But anyway, the point here is that that it's all about, not about how powerful you are or how profound you are. It's really how much you can let go. And the more you let go, the more sensitive you become. And that's not a trick. That cannot be faked. Yeah, there are people who can fake it because they're smart. But you cannot fake letting go. Either you do or you don't. And ultimately it will be seen in expressions of profound empathy. And above all, in areas where it's inconvenient for you, that you still would be sensitive to others, and you'll be able to see things that you can never see without that. So it's ultimately our own egos, or maybe better put, our own investments, the investments that we have made in our perspectives and our ideas, that in a way ultimately are a trap. And not to suggest that we should not have ideas and opinions, and so many of us have paid heavy prices for our perspectives. Have earned our way, so it's not just dismiss it all. But you never want it to be a closed door, a closed-ended story. That you figured it out, and now I got my picture, and that's it. Firstly, you probably will, through doing that, you'll lose many opportunities that you won't be able to see or perceive. And secondly, you will not really grow in the ultimate way. The growth is taking those perspectives and allowing to step back and allow more to emerge. And that's really the ultimate journey. So in a way, understanding how the soul continues on its journey after it finishes the step when it was inside of a body, and appreciating it is really appreciating how we can do the same in our own way by being able to go beyond our limited perspective. You know, I say this thing with listening because I have actually a personal experience with it. Not just an experience, it in a way shaped my life. I don't know whether I liked it or not, but the fact of the matter is I was forced to become a good listener. And I'll tell you why. I know that sounded a little weird. How could you be forced to become a listener? But I was. I'll show you why. Okay. For many years, maybe this is my claim to fame, for many years I was what was called a chayzer. A chayzer is a Hebrew word which means someone that repeats. Not like a parakeet, but when the Rebbe, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, would speak for many hours on Shabbos and holidays, so no notes were taken and no tape recorders were used. So how was the information recorded? With minds, with natural minds. So I was part of a small group, people who were compelled to have to actually remember what was said, and these are hours and hours, and I'm talking about hours, of dense, complicated discussions, and you could not take any notes. You had to just simply record it in your mind. Some call it an oral scribe, if you wish. And I learned there the real art of listening. And it is an art. And it's not so simple, and most people do not know how to really listen. Not because they're malicious, as I said earlier, and not because they don't want to listen. It takes training. And it takes Above all, recognizing you're not such a good listener. That's when you start becoming a listener, when you're ready to acknowledge that. So what's the secret to listening as opposed to hearing? And there's also a litmus test for it. Here's a good litmus test. If you're really a good listener, truly good listener, when you hear something for an hour, you should be able to repeat it. Right? So most of us would say, well, no, maybe not, because my memory isn't so good. I'm a great listener, but my memory isn't so good. That's not correct at all. I know it sounds that way, but it's not. It sounds right, but it's not correct. If you truly listened and there was nothing diluting it, you should be able to repeat it. But we know we can't. You may hear something tonight, or you may have heard something, or anywhere. You hear something that really resonated with you. Try sharing it with someone tomorrow, and you'll tell me how much you've retained. And then we start thinking maybe something's the matter with me. When I heard it really made sense. I loved it, it made sense, etc. And here I can't even repeat 2 minutes of it to someone else. There's nothing wrong with you. It's because you heard the speaker making sense. It's not that you did not own the idea yet. Until you don't take notes or you don't do something that works hard that makes it yours, you're riding on someone else's clarity, not your own. So number one is that the ears travel faster than the mind. You can hear things that you don't yet really fully understand, because if the person who's saying it understands it, it can make you think that you understand it. That doesn't mean you didn't understand it at all. Obviously, if you didn't understand it all, it would be like it would fall on deaf ears and it would just pass over. You understood it, but in a very perfunctory, in a very external way. And now comes the next step is to make it yours, and that takes work. There's no way that you can get away from that. But even more important is this. What I discovered was that we have 2 wheels in the brain. 2 wheels. We'll call one the absorber and one the processor. And the interesting thing is they cannot coexist. They cannot both function together at the same time in full intensity. When you're busy absorbing, you can't really be busy processing. You're busy processing, you can't really be absorbing. There's an expression in the Talmud, I did the Torah lemivla lepalit. Anyone knows what that means? We have the scholars in the room here. It means while you're busy absorbing, you cannot be transmitting. And when you're busy, I did the Torah lepalit lemivla. When you're busy transmitting, you can't be absorbing. A simple example. If you're in a court of law, you don't want a judge and a jury to be coming to a conclusion when they hear only one convincing piece of evidence. No matter how compelling it is, you want them to hear it all. Unless, I guess, that evidence is going your way. But I'm talking about an objective situation. Because you want them to listen to it all. Or another example, research. When you're doing research, anyone knows you don't come to any conclusions in the middle of your research, because you may find a fact that contradicts what you found. What you do is you gather as much as you can information. That's called the absorbing stage. And then, once you have it, you start building the puzzle, and something emerges, and that's the processing stage. Now here's the interesting thing. As adults, because we've developed ideas already, we don't absorb that well, we process. By contrast, children, for example, and that's why they remember so well, stories, even stupid little things that happen to them, they remember well because their processor is not mature. So they all have as an absorber. It may be hard to get a child's attention, but once you do, a child is like a dry sponge that absorbs everything. Adults process, which means when you hear me speaking right now, or you hear anyone speaking, the first thing you do, I like what this guy is saying, I don't like it, I can make money with this, I can't make money with this. Even if you're not aggressively doing that, in some subtle way, you're already, it's not about judgment, I don't mean judgment, you're processing. And the interesting paradox even further is that if you understand what the person is saying, and it stimulates ideas in you, you're even more, you're over-processing. Because you hear, let's say, an idea, and says, wow, that's a great thought, because it answers a question I had yesterday or 5 years ago, or it reminds me of another idea. So what you're doing is processing. Now, nothing wrong with processing, but it's not absorbing. So you're already so-called a partner in the transmission, so it's no longer a pure transmission from the speaker to the listener. You're not listening any longer. You're listening partially, but you're processing, and the processing is weakening your ability to absorb. It's a fact. That's why, for example, a simple exercise. I'm not in the education field per se formally, but I would make it absolutely mandatory that children and students should learn, especially adult students, should learn how to memorize. And I don't mean just memorize words. I mean to absorb. So you read a page. I can show you someone reading a page. The smarter the person is, the faster they're going to read it. But the people who really know how to listen and absorb will read it slowly and read it again and again, will have the humility to read it as many times until they get what the page says, not what they think it says. So besides our impatience, we live in a fast food age and all that, it's also our mind works against us because the processor works against the absorber, so to speak. So you can basically say we want to put it into a scientific formula, you could say the more processing you do, the less absorbing. And another second postulate for that would be that if you process when you absorb, you'll be absorbing when you should be processing. Bottom line is both will be weakened. And the people who absorb well can later process the best possible way because you've covered what was said to you. Now you're going to process it. And that's why it's something that most people don't do, because it is 2 stages. So when we were listening to the Rebbe, I can tell you right now, I remember it vividly. It was an exerted effort, a superhuman effort to shut down the processor. Because some ideas were extremely stimulating and very exciting and very intriguing. And you wanted a process, but you had to shut it down, because if I didn't, the memory would be compromised. And the interesting thing is that when I would understand something well being said, and I was confident that I understood it, that was my downfall. It's when I didn't understand it, but I knew I would remember it best. And when I understood it, it was the worst memory ever. Because by thinking I understood it, it created this type of image which was not really getting what was being said. So maybe we need to have a seminar, the art of listening. But I see this, I use this all the time in counseling people, in seeing how people speak to each other. I could pick it up in a second because I did it for 20 years. So I know what it's about. I could tell immediately. I'm not saying this to toot my horn, it's just something I'm trained to do. I could see a listener, I could see how people listen, I could see immediately someone says something and he asks the other person to respond. They're never responding to what the person said, they're responding to what they want the person to have said, or to what they think the person said, or it's partial, half and half. You see this. Women accuse men of this much more than men the other way around. You're not listening to me. And he says, honey, I heard everything you said, and he repeats it as this. You're not listening to me. And when the woman says something that the guy doesn't like, an example would be, let's say she asks for advice, or she's articulating a problem. Even before she finishes, he's already giving advice. And I remember one guy once telling me advice about something, and I didn't even finish my sentence. So I said, that's not what I was asking. So he says, well, that's what you should have been asking. Which was really, you're telling me what I should be asking, so then your answer will fit. I don't get this. What is this about you? It's about me? It's like the guy that goes on a date and he speaks about himself for 2 hours, and then he tells his date, he says, okay, enough about me now. What do you think about me? So it sounds like, okay, it's not all about me. I also want to know what you think, you can see this, since we're on the topic already, there's a thing called narcissists and there's a thing called compulsive narcissists. So someone told me once an interesting litmus test for a compulsive narcissist. Maybe it's for every narcissist, for that matter. Don't try this alone at home. Okay. So here's the litmus test: that within 3 minutes of a conversation, the person will make sure the conversation somewhere gets back. He's in there somewhere. I. So you may be talking about, let's say, man landing on the moon in 1969, and somewhere you're going to hear the I, that I, something there. There's no ability to talk about something without the word I in there. That's number one. The second thing of that type, compulsive narcissist, is that if you disagree with that person, let's say they're trying to convince you of something, and you don't accept it, they're never going to hear what you're saying and adjust. They'll just rephrase it like a good lawyer, and rephrase it like, say, okay, you know what, I guess you didn't understand what I really meant, so I'm going to give it to you in a different way. That's really essentially the message. In other words, incapable of truly having a conversation. So obviously I'm using some extreme examples, but I want to go back to all of this. It ultimately comes down to the listening. I'm just using it as an example of getting beyond yourself. And you'd be surprised what kind of new vistas, new opportunities emerge when you allow yourself to do that. Initially, it sounds a little scary in a way. Why would I give up my perspective, so to speak? But it's the healthiest people that are able to do that. If push comes to shove, think about it. Why is a person not ready to give up their perspective, or suspend it at least for a while? Because they're insecure. And they feel, if you take away those eggs from my basket, I have nothing left. Secure people have no problem with hearing a different opinion, because they don't feel they're going to become annihilated by it. So I'm not trying to judge anyone that's that way. Often, those of us that have been silenced in our lives, or whose dignity has been trampled upon, and we've not been reinforced, whether it's in childhood or later in life, those of us are fighting for our turf all the time. And that's why it's so difficult sometimes to hear another opinion, because you feel, what about me? So it's fully understandable when a person's self has been so-called abused or violated. Some of us spend our lives preserving and trying to protect ourselves. But the interesting thing is that you also may be cutting off the possibility of finding what you're looking for. So the challenge is, how do you find people you can trust, that you could listen to, even though those that you did listen to hurt you? So I'm not suggesting it's an easy process, but the fact is, you want the best of both worlds. No question you want to be able to have a strong sense of self. But that should not be confused with locking yourself into a perspective, because if you do that, you ultimately you still remain trapped in that zone, so to speak. So what does all this have to do with Sarah and the life of Sarah? I think I explained it, but I'll just sum it up. It has to do with understanding life, far greater definitions and far greater boundaries than we are accustomed to. And I don't want to say that this is the reason God allows death in our lives and why we have that, because it's painful and we all hope we shouldn't have to ever experience any loss. But I could say that there's no question that appreciating life is different when you know that there are other dimensions and that we can't always connect to them. And that itself is a humbling fact that helps us appreciate that there's more that's going on that meets the eye. I'll use myself as an example. 6.5 years ago, my father passed away. And it's, in many ways, maybe the most definitive moment in my life. Obviously, I've had many special, great moments, and I'm not suggesting it's the biggest moment, but very definitive, because, it made me rethink many, many things. I can't say I'm a changed person because of it, but definitely I understand dimensions of existence that I would never have imagined. And obviously, it probably helped in my case, because I was familiar with spirituality before that. But I never saw it in such a vivid way. Seeing a life that you loved, that shaped you, part of your being from the age you can't even remember, and then it's just not there physically. So I'm not just talking about the regulates of physical. Okay, there's that physical thing, but it made me come to think and understand a lot of the dimensions of realities that I've always studying. I saw it for the first time, was tangible in a way. And I realized the challenge is very profound. And I looked at my own mentors and people that came before me, how they dealt with it. Everybody became a more profound spiritual person afterwards. I'm not saying everyone in the world becomes, because many of us, it's like what you go in, that's how you come out. But it forces you to have to think about life in a whole different way. Not just your own mortality and use your time well, and that we all have our numbered days. That's one side of it. I'm talking about much more profound than that. It's appreciating dimensions of what really matters and what doesn't matter. And the fact is, this material world has extremely seductive tentacles that keep us trapped. And you are, and we are refrigerators. Call it by another name, whatever. We're boxes. And every box has its parameters and its definitions. And then you create a whole new series of IDs that you think are important to you. And I'm not saying they're not important on some level, but they're not the beginning and end of your life. Your social security number and the credit cards and everything you have in your wallet. We all know when a wallet is lost what kind of nightmare that is. But you also start thinking to yourself, who am I? You almost feel like your whole life has been torn away. it happens. I'm not suggesting that's a good thing that it happens, but it also makes you think that, is this my life? Is this the biggest disaster? But that's how we become. We become shaped by our ideas. I have a whole file in my office of every username and password for every stupid program we do. And you can't always use the same one, because this one needs 8 digits and this one is 6 digits and this one needs a number and this one needs capitals, that type. And sometimes I look at it and I start laughing to myself. This material world's created all these type of ideas that become the way you start defining yourself, when it's not at all who we really are. And it's very rare and quite refreshing to be able to be with people that help remind you that you are a soul, as some of the thinkers say. It's not that we're souls on a physical journey. It's not that we are souls taking a physical journey. It's the other way around. It's not that we're bodies on a spiritual journey. We're souls on a physical journey. That was the way I was going to put it. But it's not easy to see it that way, because on a day-to-day basis we have to eat and sleep and shop and commute and do this and do that. We're constantly trapped by that. And the fascinating thing is, Judaism is not suggesting asceticism, to leave it all and go find the world of the spirit. It's how do you bridge the two? But the first step is to know that there is more. So read the chapters, the life of Sarah, and then you hear it's all about afterwards. Because that's when you see what kind of impact she had. Day before, you could say her impact was because she was around. But when you see how Isaac cherished his mother and sees the sublime nature of his future wife Rebecca, because she reminds him of his mother, which is quite a good contrast by most of us today that don't want to meet someone that reminds us of our mother. So that's also an interesting study. And you see how the love of Abraham, that he wants to find a burial plot that would forever, till this day, immortalize the place where Sarah is buried. That would become the Hebron that we're still fighting over, actually. These things show that Sarah must have been something, because that impact. And he wondered how many of us are going to be remembered in 3,700 years from now? Who even knows what's going to be 3,700 years? Or for how many people are remembered 5 years after they're gone? I don't just mean by a few of their relatives. So you start wondering what really life is, what mark we leave. What would you really want a friend of yours to be impacted by you? And you realize there's a real contrast. There's a real dichotomy, two worlds. So yes, there is a life beyond the borders, down the rabbit hole, beyond the doors of perception, all these titles. But it's not just a poem and not just a fantasy. It's actually right here for your taking. Right? That's the right word. For your taking. But it requires one condition, which is the hardest one. You have to suspend yourself. Suspend temporarily to be able to allow that into your life. And every one of us can do so. You can do it in the morning, you can do it in the evening, any time of the day. The first step is cognizance, to be aware of it. And maybe listening is a good place to begin. Ask your friends how good of a listener you are. Well, they may not want to insult you, so I don't know what kind of answer you'll get. But maybe you can find some way to figure it out. And it's interesting. It's an interesting exercise. Listening is something else. Because listening, when you're really able to listen, you hear things that you would never imagine you hear. You hear people, you could hear between the lines, and things that you would not hear when you're in the mode of speaking or half speaking and half listening. And I could say for myself, the years that I did that, though I don't do it today really, because I haven't found somebody to listen to quite in the same way, but there's no question it changed my entire life, because I don't even know who I would have been without that. It taught me to be able to really separate those two wheels. And there's no question you're able to understand things in a different way. None of us are perfect. We all make our mistakes. But when you're able to listen well, you make a lot less mistakes, because you absorb before you process. And you have the ability, the patience, the deliberation necessary to reflect. You don't just jump on things. You listen to it, you sleep over it, you review options, you're thorough, and stuff like that. Again, it's nothing, no guarantees, but it definitely creates a whole different way of looking at things. But it's a challenge, and the challenge is our own needs and our own myopic tools. and our own fears, which of course is maybe the most powerful because they're not really in our control. It's fears that we don't really control. It's not like you can just say, will them away. So that requires obviously a few more classes to talk about the fears, which we shall do as we, see this as a work in progress. And we have to at some point say, as they say by Simchas Torah, At Kan HaKofa Aleph, right? You have to someplace stop the dancing. I don't know if this is dancing, but whatever we call this. And talk about dancing. Some dance to remember, some dance to forget, as they say. And hopefully our dancing is to remember. So I want to say the class is dedicated to the second yahrzeit of our good friend Philip's mother, Sora Risha Bas Leah, second yahrzeit. So Philip is actually giving a class tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Is anyone interested? Philip is a colleague student of mine, a musician, an interesting fellow. Call him the blues guy. And also Velvel's grandmother, Liba Bas Rab Amram, 16th yahrzeit. What day is that? Oh, tonight. Okay. This is Velvel, our good old friend Velvel. Rab Amram Bloy. Okay, very nice. And talk about souls. I mean, these are souls that have passed on. It's from 16 years ago, another 2 years ago. And we all have here family members, hopefully not your parents, but grandparents or great-grandparents that are not physically here. We say at a chuppah, at a wedding ceremony, these neshamas in some way are more present, even though they're always present, but for some reason, obviously, when they come and shep and gather nachas from their families. So the fact is, these souls are sitting right here in this room with us. They see us and we don't see them. That's how it works. We cannot see behind the curtain. But that should not necessarily be a saddening thought. It should be, maybe it motivates us to want to see it. And that makes us, that drives us. And it drives us to try to appreciate these deeper experiences. And so when you close your eyes and your ears, you taste, touch, and smell, and you experience a little bittul, some of these dimensions that are behind the curtain begin to emerge. Just as God told Moses that you'll see me when you don't look at me. You want to see my face, you have to not look. By not looking, you can see, as we've discussed. So we honor these neshamas. I also will mention that tonight is also another yahrzeit of one of the Chabad Rebbes that shaped myself as well, the Rebbe Rashab, Chav Cheshvan, 20th of Cheshvan, which is the 5th Chabad Rebbe, who was the author of some of the most fundamental Hasidic discourses. One I wrote about a few years ago, the 100th anniversary, it was called Samach Vov. And this year actually begins even a more powerful discourse, even more, I don't say powerful, even more elaborate one, called Ayin Beis. So look forward, you're going to hear more about that. I know right now it sounds cryptic, but Ayin Beis really means the year 72. So it was the year 1912. So 2012 will be 100 years from then. And I intend to do try to do some serious things about that. But since it's his yahrzeit tonight, I thought I should mention that as well. And we should only talk about great things and have connection to souls altogether in beautiful ways and in joyful ways. And above all, it's to remember that while we're here, we have the ability to connect, and we don't have to wait for some type of curtain to come down or a long black cloud to come down. So in that spirit, it's an honor to commune with fellow sojourners, fellow kindred spirits and souls traveling through this earth. That means I mean you all. It's an honor to intersect, and hopefully we all can benefit from each other and bear fruit from our interactions, and to see ourselves as souls simply traveling through this dimension, this plane called the material world. And with that being said, please stay in touch. We have if you haven't left your email address, please connect with that. I know email is not purely soul, but it's a way for souls to communicate on this earth. And so please do that. I send out a weekly email thought, hopefully a soulful thought every week. And any other way that we could be of assistance to you, myself, Velvel Meaningful Life Center, please see us as a resource, as an asset, as an ally, as a friend in this world of many strangers. So with that being said, thank you so much. Everyone should have a great week, a soulful week, and free your spirits. Thank you.